In the Bible, God speaks to people in lots of different ways. He spoke to Samuel so naturally that Samuel thought he was just having a chat with his master Eli. He spoke to Joseph and Daniel through dreams. But the person we're looking at today, whose name was Ezekiel, well, God spoke to him through visions. A vision, well, I guess it's kind of like a dream, but it happens while you're awake. For instance, Ezekiel was one day sat by a river in Babylon when he sees a storm approaching. But this isn't any ordinary storm, oh no. At the very heart of this storm, there are 4 living creatures. Ezekiel describes them as being mostly human, but there were 1 or 2 little details that gave away that they were a bit more than just human. I mean, for instance, they had wings. Always a bit of a clue. Then there was the fact that these people were a bit two-faced. In fact, they were quite a lot two-faced. They were so two-faced that they actually had 4 faces. Their first face was a human face, and then, in case they needed it, they had a spare face, which is the face of a lion. And if that wasn't enough, they also had an eagle's face. And just for good measure, there was also an oxen's face. Not that you can really see it very much right now. Now, that, I think you'll agree, would be a bit unnerving if it suddenly ran towards you. But after that, things start to get strange. You see, these 4 living creatures, although they could fly, they also had wheels. And not just wheels, but wheels within wheels that could go anywhere. And if that wasn't enough, the wheels, they had eyes on them, all over the place. I think you'll agree, that's quite impressive. Not necessarily very practical, wouldn't want to drive through a muddy puddle like that, but still, very impressive nonetheless. Now, these 4 living creatures, well, on top of all of that weirdness, literally on top of all that weirdness, they had a crystal arch. And on top of the crystal arch, they had a sapphire throne. And sat on the sapphire throne, there was a figure who Ezekiel says was like glowing metal, fresh out of a furnace. And that would definitely look a little bit weird if it headed towards you. Oh, and by the way, did I mention it was also on fire? I mean, I don't think they were getting burnt up or anything, but there was fire all over the place. Now that's got to be quite a strange thing to see heading towards you in a storm. But however strange it may seem, I think there was a reason why God did it. You see, in the Bible it says, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. And so even though it must have been pretty scary for Ezekiel to see something like that coming towards him, every little bit of that vision had something that could teach Ezekiel a bit about God. Take, for instance, those wheels within wheels that could go anywhere, and God's throne was on top of them. I wonder if maybe that was God's way of saying that God is everywhere. He can go anywhere he likes. He's not just in one country or another country, he's in the whole world. And if God's everywhere, he's with us now. And if he's with us, we should probably be doing what he says we should. Just a thought. Well then, take those eyes that were all over the wheels that could go anywhere. I wonder if that was God's way of telling Ezekiel, remember, God sees everything. And if God sees everything, he sees it when we're doing good stuff. But he also sees it when we're doing bad stuff. And if he sees it when we're doing bad stuff, well, probably it'd be a good idea to do what he tells us to. And what about those 4 living creatures' faces? Well, those creatures were part of God's creation. He'd made all of them. And I guess when God's throne was on top of all of the birds and all of the animals and all of the beasts and all of the humans. Maybe that was a way of saying that God rules everything. And if God rules everything, we should definitely do the things he tells us. It must have been quite weird for Ezekiel to see that vision. But you know, even today, if we take to heart what it says, I reckon it could really change our lives.